Jenny adjusted her backpack, the late afternoon sun filtering through the dense canopy of the Hallowed Woods. She glanced at her friends, Tom and Lisa, who were arguing over the map. They were seasoned hikers, but the Hallowed Woods had a reputation for being a labyrinth. "We're on the right path, Tom," Lisa insisted, tracing a line on the map with her finger. Tom sighed, looking up at the towering trees around them. "It just feels like we've been going in circles." Jenny shivered despite the warm day. There was something unsettling about these woods. The deeper they ventured, the quieter it became. No bird song, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive silence. "Guys, let's just keep moving. We'll find a campsite eventually," Jenny urged, trying to mask her unease. They walked in silence, the shadows lengthening as the sun dipped lower. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a clearing. It was small, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to lean in, their gnarled branches reaching like skeletal fingers. "Let's set up camp here," Tom suggested. "We can figure out where we are in the morning." Reluctantly, Lisa and Jenny agreed. They pitched their tents and started a small fire. As darkness fell, the air grew cold and the silence even more oppressive. They huddled around the fire, its flickering light casting eerie shadows. "Do you guys know the legend of Slenderman?" Tom asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Jenny rolled her eyes. "Seriously, Tom. We're in the middle of nowhere, and you want to tell ghost stories." Lisa, however, seemed intrigued. "I've heard about it. Isn't he some kind of tall, faceless figure that stalks people in the woods?" Tom nodded, his expression serious. "Yeah, supposedly, he appears to those who are lost, feeds off their fear, and then takes them. They say his arms can stretch endlessly, and he has no face, just a blank, white canvas." Jenny laughed nervously. "Okay, enough. We're already lost. Let's not make it worse with creepy stories." The conversation died down, and one by one, they retreated to their tents. Jenny lay awake, the uneasy feeling gnawing at her. She tried to shake off Tom's story, but every creak and rustle outside made her heart race. Sometime in the middle of the night, she was jolted awake by a faint sound. It was a distant, echoing scream. She sat up, her breath quickening. The scream came again, louder this time. "Lisa, Tom," she called, her voice trembling. Tom unzipped his tent and stumbled out, looking around in confusion. Lisa emerged a moment later, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" Jenny whispered. Tom nodded. It sounded like someone in pain. They gathered around the dying embers of the fire, the darkness pressing in on them. The scream echoed again, closer this time, sending chills down their spines. "We need to check it out," Tom said, grabbing a flashlight. Jenny and Lisa exchanged worried glances, but followed him. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the twisted trees and undergrowth. They moved cautiously, every snap of a twig making them jump. As they ventured deeper, the screams became more sporadic, almost as if whoever was making them was moving away from them. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees growing thicker and more menacing. "Maybe we should go back," Jenny suggested, her voice barely a whisper. But Tom pressed on, determined to find the source. They stumbled upon a strange clearing, larger than the previous one. In the center stood an old, decrepit cabin, its windows shattered and the door hanging off its hinges. "Do you think someone lives here?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Tom shook his head. "Looks abandoned. But maybe someone sought refuge here." They approached the cabin cautiously. The air was thick with tension. Tom pushed the door open, the hinges creaking ominously. Inside, the cabin was dark and musty, the only light coming from their flashlight. Suddenly, the beam illuminated something on the wall. It was a series of drawings, crude and childlike, depicting a tall, faceless figure with unnaturally long arms. Jenny's heart skipped a beat. "It's him," she whispered. Slenderman. Before they could react, a loud thump echoed from above. They looked up, the wooden ceiling creaking under some unknown weight. "Someone's up there," Tom said, his voice barely audible. They climbed the rickety stairs, each step protesting under their weight. The upper floor was empty, save for an old, dust-covered bed and a small window that looked out into the forest. Tom approached the window, shining his flashlight outside. "There's nothing here," he said, turning back to them. But Jenny and Lisa were frozen in place, their eyes wide with terror. Tom followed their gaze and saw it. Standing just outside the cabin, illuminated by the moonlight, was a tall, slender figure with no face. Tom's blood ran cold. He stumbled back, the flashlight dropping from his hand. The figure stood motionless, watching them. Then, slowly, it began to move, its arms stretching out towards them. "Run," Tom shouted. They bolted down the stairs, the cabin creaking and groaning around them. Bursting through the door, they ran into the forest, not daring to look back. The screams began again, echoing through the trees, but this time they were different, more distorted, as if coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. They ran blindly, branches slashing at their faces and arms. Jenny's lungs burned, her legs felt like lead, but fear drove her forward. The screams grew louder, and she could feel the presence of the Slenderman closing in. Suddenly, the ground disappeared beneath her feet. She tumbled down a steep hill, hitting the ground hard. Dazed, she struggled to her feet, looking around frantically for her friends. "Tom, Lisa," she called out, her voice cracking. There was no response, just the oppressive silence of the forest. Panic surged through her. She was alone. Then she saw him. Slenderman stood at the top of the hill, his faceless head tilted as if studying her. Desperate, Jenny scrambled to her feet and ran. She didn't know where she was going, just that she needed to get away. The forest seemed endless, the trees blurring together in her frantic flight. Finally, her strength gave out. She collapsed to the ground, sobbing. The Slenderman was nowhere to be seen, but she knew he was close. She could feel his presence, like a cold, suffocating fog. As she lay there, exhausted and terrified, she heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw Tom and Lisa emerging from the shadows. Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. Their expressions were blank, their eyes empty. "Jenny," Tom said, his voice monotone. "We have to go back." "No," she whimpered. "We need to get out of here." Lisa stepped forward, her face devoid of emotion. "He's waiting for us." Jenny backed away, her heart pounding. This isn't real. This can't be real. But the forest around her seemed to close in, the trees whispering her name. She looked up and saw Slenderman standing among the trees, his arms outstretched. There was no escape. With a final, desperate scream, Jenny's world went dark. When the search party found their campsite days later, there was no trace of Jenny, Tom, or Lisa. Just their abandoned tents and the faint echo of screams that seemed to linger in the air. The legend of the Hallowed Woods grew, and the name Slenderman became synonymous with fear. And somewhere, deep in those ancient woods, the faceless figure continued to watch, waiting for his next lost souls.